afternoon, everybody. Welcome in from across the continent for another very exciting Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants broadcast. If you're joining us for the first time, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And it's very exciting that you're joining us for two big reasons today. Number one, this is February. This is our entire month solely dedicated to showcasing the most amazing scientists and explorers, women scientists and explorers on planet Earth. We've had 50 broadcasts this month alone with Egyptologists, paleontologists, Arctic botanists, and more. It has been such a wild ride, and everything we do is on our YouTube channel. So I really encourage you to check that out. There's so much to explore and discover right there. And of course, as all of you on our Zoo YouTube and Facebook pages will know, this is also very exciting because we are joined by our friends at the Toronto Zoo. We're the digital education partner for the zoo. We've done dozens of broadcasts with them over the years, and it's been so exciting featuring their incredible stories of wildlife and conservation. We're on a big mission to highlight all the IUCN organizations in Canada working to reverse the red, do great things to save species around this planet. I really encourage you to check out those links if you want to find out about the cutting edge conservation work being done around the globe. But today at the zoo, we are in my favorite pavilion. Don't tell the other pavilions. We are in the Australasia Pavilion with Mary Ellen, the most featured educator in the history of Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. So I'm so excited to turn you over to her to blow your mind with stories of invasive species, what kind of threat they face, what we're doing to stop them, and more in, as I said, my favorite place, the Australasia Pavilion. So Mary Ellen, welcome back to the broadcast. Nice to see you again.
Hello. Thank you. That is quite the title to be able to say also that I am the most featured educator. That's fantastic. That's news to me. So I love that. I might have to add it to my signature on my email.
I think so.
Make it like an official qualification. And Jesse and I are very alike. This is also my favorite pavilion in the entire zoo. So we have to keep that under wraps. The other pavilions are pretty cool. We're actually going to be touring the Rainforest Pavilion next week with our March program with you as well, which is also a great space. But as you're going to see as we walk around Australasia today, it is absolutely fantastic. And you're going to see so quickly why Jesse and I love it so very much. From the plants and the animals that live here to all the information we're going to learn about it today and why we should protect areas just like it. Now, before we get into our main program here, I'm going to have Jesse bring up our land acknowledgement for me. And we're just going to do that really quickly as well. So we'd like to acknowledge that the land that we are on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississauga of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We would also like to acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississauga of the Credit and the William Treaty signed with multiple Mississauga and Chippewa bands. Thank you, Jesse. So, as mentioned, we are here in the Australasia Pavilion, and really the talk that we're doing today and what we're going to be learning about could be really in any area of the zoo. And I picked Australasia because it is one of my favorites. But there's so much that we can talk about because what we're talking about today is something that affects every habitat, every biome, everywhere, every person all over the world. And I even have a very excited counterpart here behind me who's squawking a little bit. I hope you can hear him. And we're going to turn around and introduce as well to some of our friends behind me. Now, we are going to be learning about invasive species today. That is going to be our whole talk that we're going to be learning about. And really, invasive species can be anywhere in the world. And what we're going to learn about is maybe why they're here, what can we do to prevent them, why they might be helping or hindering in certain ways, and what we're doing here at the zoo to manage our own populations around the zoo, but then also how we're trying to help in other parts of the world as well. Now, I know that we probably have some friends joining us online today, and I like to ask a lot of questions to our audience. So I always recommend you're close to your keyboard, and so you can be able to type out an answer if I ask a question. And then Jesse is always so helpful in being your voice on our call today. So Jesse, let's test our audience. Let's see if everyone's awake, wide awake alert. Let's see, can anyone tell me what an invasive species is?
Ooh, okay.
Yes,
and we've got a bunch of
and while we're doing that, I'll turn around and turn the camera so that you can actually see our friend here in front of us and not just look at me the whole video as well.
Amazing. Well, we have folks on our Toronto Zoo and our Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants YouTube channels and folks on our Zoo Facebook page. So if you guys want to chime in on what an invasive species is, we'd love to hear from you. I see all your comments and questions in the chat on the side. So a species or an animal that is not where it's meant to be, one that's coming from somewhere else. Like you guys are on the ball already. Examples we were given, let's see. We've got duckweed, we've got zebra mussels have been put in the chat, so people know some examples of invasive species that might have come to our Southern Ontario audience. That's fantastic. Not native to the area. Mary Ellen, they're on the ball here. I think they know.
That's amazing. Yeah, we got a fast and really intense audience today, and I love to hear that. So you are all on the exact right track. So an invasive species is a plant or animal species that is currently living in an area where they're not originally from, and they might be actually causing more harm than good to that environment that they're now living in or have been introduced to. And invasive species can happen in a few different ways. They can come over more or less like accidentally or in a more natural setting. And then they also can be brought over in a more intentional way by humans, but also maybe by accident through that as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about how we can get them. But we're going to keep going through here because our friends here are very amazing in front of us, but they are quite loud. But we're going to learn about some of the endemic species that live here in Australasia and who are found in this part of the world who aren't found anywhere else. So a really cool species we have in front of us right now is we have a red-tailed black cockatoo. And you might be able to tell he's a little far away right now, but he's got his wings. He's spreading them out for us. It's obviously a black bird with a bright red tail. So they're very, very accurately named, which I love animals like that. And they're one of the species who call this area of the world their home. And we're going to learn a little bit more as we walk through about our bird species and how invasive species can harm them. But because we're in Australasia, Jesse has probably heard this 100 times doing programs with me. I have to shout out an animal here at the zoo that I have never seen. And she's a little unrelated to our topic today, but I always just like to point her out because I think it's very cool, is we have an animal called an echidna. And if you've never heard of an echidna, I recommend you Googling it, but essentially a platypus and a porcupine had a baby. And that is kind of what an echidna looks like. And Annie, our echidna here, lives in this exhibit now. And Annie likes to burrow into the ground. So she really enjoys being underground and kind of hidden. She's also not really awake at this time of day. So when I come through for my programs for Jessie, there's the chance of me seeing her in a program is almost zero. And it's very sad for me. For 9 years at the zoo, I have never seen Annie the echidna. And I am ever so hopeful that the first time that I ever see her will be on an Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants program.
We hope for you. We really do. I've always wanted to see Annie too. It's been built up so much now over the few years.
Right? It's honestly, Jesse, we have to at some point, and maybe we will be lucky enough someday to see her. That would be fantastic. Okay, so as we continue through our pavilion here, you're going to notice a lot of plant species. Now, in our pavilions here at the zoo, we try really hard with our horticulture teams to have natural and native plants, which means the plants that we're looking at here oftentimes can be found in those natural areas in the world. And the horticulture team does a great job keeping them alive, giving them the plants what they need to survive here. And you'll notice that these kind of plants are only inside. And that's because here in Canada, we have 4 very distinct seasons. And oftentimes tropical plants like this have a lot harder of a time being able to survive in our harsh climates and conditions. We just went through a massive snowstorm a couple weeks back, and nothing tropical outside would have been able to survive. Okay, we're coming around the corner here. We're gonna keep our eyes peeled for some other species here. And I actually have in front of us, this is one of my favorite bird species. These are the Victoria crown pigeon. And they are actually a species listed as vulnerable. So Jesse was talking about the IUCN Red List a little bit as well. And we are able to rank and classify animals and plant species based on how they're doing in the wild on this list as well. We can kind of see if their populations are stable, if they're declining, if they're increasing. And it's available for everyone to be able to see and look at, which is really cool. Now, invasive species who come into a habitat like this are really dangerous for native species that live in that area. And that's because they take away vital resources for them. If you are an invasive species and you're able to survive in a new habitat around you, you are probably not facing any predators. So nothing there knows what you are and is able to eat you, or might be too scared to eat you. Maybe they don't know what you taste like, if you're poisonous, if you're venomous, if you're dangerous in any way. So you're not having any predators. And you probably have your pick then of food as well, whether it be herbivore food, or if you're looking to hunt or anything, if they're a carnivore or a omnivore species, the animals that they would be hunting don't know who they are, and so therefore may not be as scared or as afraid of them at first. And so they'd be able to have their pick of what they would want to be able to eat, and would start to thrive and survive in that brand new habitat. And that's not great. Basically, what happens is that new species that's invasive takes over and is then able to outgrow the native species. So all the plants that we see here and the animals that are in this area would be heavily impacted by a new species that doesn't provide anything new for their habitat. So essentially, the new animals coming in are not able to contribute to the actual habitat themselves. Now, I mentioned there's a few different ways that invasive species can enter into a new habitat. Let's test our audience here again. Does anyone know the different ways that an invasive species could be brought in and introduced?
Ooh, we actually already had some answers for that from our chat earlier. So horticulture, agriculture industry. So maybe when we're planting crops, when we're bringing in irrigation, we might accidentally bring some species. We had shipping. So when people are transporting goods over oceans, maybe they can bring things in. Travel, transport. We did a Parks Canada broadcast the other day where people are bringing boats into different rivers and lakes and, across provincial and state boundaries and bringing in species that way. So our audience is really on the ball for some ways that people could bring stuff in. This is fantastic, Mary Ellen.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing. Everyone pretty much did everything I was going to say there. That was fantastic. So exactly, human transport. Humans, we're all over the world. We are a global species for sure. And so when we have boats or ships moving and transporting different items or food to us or agriculture, we can sometimes have pests tag along. Somebody mentioned earlier about zebra mussels as well. They can cling to the bottom of boats. So they can be a huge issue that we have here in Canada as well. And so these species can come in accidentally if we're not careful. And some of the ways that other countries are preventing it, if they know that they have native or at-risk species, a lot of places will make you do foot baths or, change out shoes or wear protective covering on your feet, depending on where you're going, or if you're walking into a native forest or like a protected lands. And they do this for invasive species protection to make sure that you're not accidentally bringing something new in. You don't know what you've stepped on. Maybe if your shoes are from your native country and you're traveling somewhere else, you might be carrying an egg or a creature with you that you're not sure about or didn't know, and could be depositing it in a new environment that is not ready to protect itself from that invasive species. Animals are adapted and are able to thrive and survive in the environment that they're naturally meant to be in. So for example, if we're looking at our turtle here in front of us, so this is a fly river turtle. Turtles are developed for this habitat. They have their fins. They have like a little pig nose coming up, which is quite cute. Actually, hopefully he gives us a look of it with his face there. And they're able to, stick their nose up, get some breaths, hold their breath for a very long time to be able to swim underwater. They have these special adaptations to thrive and survive and be a part of their ecosystem and food webs that in their habitat. And when we throw in a new animal or plant species, it can really disrupt it. Now, Australasia is super important. I mentioned the word endemic earlier. Does anyone know what endemic means? We're going to be talking about that next week as well when we're in the rainforest, because there's a lot of species in Madagascar that are also endemic to that area. That might give you a hint there.
Ooh, let's see if anyone chimes in with what endemic is. We've actually covered this a few times in our zoo programs, so let's see if anyone wants to chime in. By the way, we've got people commenting on the great swimming of the turtle as well, so thank you very much for that, Janet. Endemic belongs to a spot from a certain area, so that's a good lead-in, I think. Mary Ellen, tell us a little more.
Definitely, yeah. So it means that they live in a certain area of the world, and not only do they live there, but they can only be found there. Sometimes you see species are able to be found in a few, maybe habitats that are like each other, but an endemic species is only found in one place of the world. And that means they can only survive really in that one place. And so it's really important for us to be able to protect and save their habitat to make sure that they always have a safe place to live. Next week, a really famous example, and one you probably heard of, we're going to be talking about them on Monday, actually, Jesse, as well, is ring-tailed lemurs. There's a lot of lemur species that are endemic to Madagascar in the world, and they can only be found there. So it's really important to protect their habitat because they don't naturally exist anywhere else in the world. Which means if that habitat is compromised in any way, that species, may not be able to survive or continue on. And we would have a very difficult time with reintroduction and protecting that species later in life as well. Now, Jesse, I'm so sorry. I've done something with my camera here. I'm going to find an animal for us to look at. And then I need to take a quick pause break here. Today is the day of technical difficulties for us. My camera is flipped. And so I don't know if you've noticed, I keep missing the animal in frame because I've picked the wrong version of the camera. So give me one quick second here.
Why don't you play around with your camera? We'll head back to our snakes and turtles in just a second. And I just want to note again, if you want to check out way more programs in the Toronto Zoo, they're all at torontozoo.com. is an amazing resource to learn about the work that they're doing. And our YouTube channel has, I think, 45 plus zoo programs now. And we'll be back on Monday with the amazing Africa Pavilion if you want to learn more about the species there that we've been alluding to throughout today's broadcast, if you've been paying attention. Looks like Mary Ellen might be in a better setup now. We're going to check in. How's it going?
I think so, yes. I think we flipped our camera back there, so I now know left is right and right is right and left is left there. So now I'm able to actually focus in on the animals in front of us here. Cool. There we go. Okay, back to our train of thought here. So talking about endemic species and why it's so important for them. And then again, talking about the different species where you can find them all over the world and how they might be related, or they might be able to survive in different areas. A great example for this is our look-alike snakes that we have here. Oh, no, I did not fix it because this is now backwards for us still here. But we have a green tree python and an emerald tree boa. And these two snakes don't actually live in the same areas of the world as each other. They do live in different areas, but they're very similar snakes. And that's because they occupy a really similar habitat. So they have a lot of adaptations that make them appear very similar and act very similar to each other as well. They're both arboreal snake species, meaning they like to live up in the trees and be more of a tree-dwelling species. They're kind of more of a crepuscular, not a diurnal species, which means they're not awake at this time of the day as much, which is why you see them kind of cuddled up and cozied up here instead. Instead of being active like you might see other snake species, they're having a little bit of a nap right now. So maybe we'll move on from our snakes here as well, just because they're not necessarily the best viewable animal for us. But let's come down. We're going to come down to the underwater section of Australasia here, and we're going to see a really prime example of an invasive species, not one that's invasive to Australasia, but one that's invasive to other parts of the world as well. So we're going to come down through. This is our underwater section. It's very dark and spooky down here. And let's see if we can find our friend down here. Okay, so unfortunately, our main focal animal, in the time that I have gotten to this pavilion and back, it looks like he has been moved off exhibit temporarily, but we're going to talk a little bit about him quickly while we're standing at one of our other fish tanks here. So we have some cool fish to look at, is our lionfish. Now, lionfish are very, very strikingly bold species. They have their, oh, you know what? There he is. He's been moved for us here. There we go. We can track them now in the water here. So our lionfish, they've got these kind of spikes on the front of them, and they're able to defend themselves and be able to inject venom into prey species around them. But they're actually an invasive species in other parts of the world. And they can have huge detriment to the environment and the habitat that they are living in. And again, they take over. They don't have any natural predators. Nothing can attack them and eat them. And so it makes it very difficult for the natural species to be able to take over and thrive in their natural habitat. Now, here at the Toronto Zoo, we are not new to invasive species. There are several in Ontario. We actually mentioned some when I was quizzing you at the beginning. But another really common one that we have around here is something called dog strangling vine. Has anyone in the comments heard about dog strangling vine before that?
We actually have had someone mention that already, so there you go.
Perfect, yeah. So It's a really common example here at the zoo, and you can pretty much find it if you are in Ontario and you are walking outside. I'd show you right now, but we have about 5 or 6 feet of snow still outside in some areas, so we have far too much snow for me to find it. But dog strangling vine is a species of plant that wraps itself around other plants living nearby it. And it actually chokes them out, so they're not able to send nutrients to the other parts of their column or their living systems. And so unfortunately the native species die out from this. And what ends up happening is the dog strangling vine takes over. And something that's very big about invasive species as well is that they tend to be extremely adapted to any kind of survival. So they're able to live in any environment, but also they're very hardy plants and animals. So even if you rip dog strangling vine out of the ground, if you accidentally leave some of the roots in, you're going to still have it regrow the next season, and it's just going to keep coming back and coming back. So it's something that we really have to work on when we are eradicating invasive species from areas in the world. There has to be a lot of research done about how to remove them and remove them safely, but also then make sure that they don't come back. And it's a constant battle that we're facing. So here at the zoo, we actually have dog strangling vine pulls where we're able to go out as a team. It's kind of like a volunteer, and our horticulture team does it as well. They will go out and they'll have dog strangling vine pulls where you all go and you pull as much dog strangling vine as you can out, just so we try and keep our population of it a little bit lower here. And so then that way our site can be filled with the naturally occurring plant species that you would find here in Ontario and here in the Rouge as well. And also educating. So programs like this, we also celebrate a lot of days on site here. There's pop-ups that happen with our species recovery teams who work out in the natural fields here around the Toronto Zoo and in the natural waters, who are seeing the impact the most from these different invasive species, where we are able to educate the public on it, how you can try and help stop them. You can participate in different pulls that you might have in your local community. They might set up times where you could go and help uproot invasive species. Also thinking about what you plant. If you have a garden at home and you're thinking about planting like a pollinator garden or some sort of pretty flowers for the new summer or the springtime, it's really important to make sure that you are picking native species to where you live. So we're here in Ontario and Toronto, but if you live somewhere else in the world, you need to research where your plants or what is native to your local area and try and prioritize those plant species to better help the native animals who live around you as well. But then also making sure that we don't pull or add any new invasive species into the environment around us. And our horticulture team looks very closely on this as well, because they take care of all the gardens that we have here at the zoo. So they make sure that the plants that they're planting everywhere are either native or they don't travel or spread quickly, so they don't have the opportunity to become invasive. And there's a lot of permissions and everything that we have to go through to make sure that we're able to plant all these different kind of more exotic plants here at the zoo. And we take a lot of care with cross-contamination with our animals as well. We have a tank here at the zoo that has carp in it, and here that is another form of an invasive species. And they work really hard to make sure that the water filtration is very strong in those tanks, to make sure that if any water in the circulation in them gets back into the water system here in Toronto, it doesn't spike any numbers and indicate that maybe carp are here when they're not. They're just here at the Toronto Zoo. So we work really hard to make sure that our water filtration systems are taking any trace of them out, to make sure we're not falsifying numbers or affecting any studies done in nearby bodies of water, which is really cool as well. Now, Jesse, I could ramble on. There's a lot to keep talking about here, but I want to do a check-in just because I know we don't have any live classes with us here today, and we had such an active audience before. I want to make sure we give a lot of time for any questions today. So I'll throw it back to you for a minute here and see if we have any questions for our group.
Amazing. Well, we have a couple to begin, and please do, YouTubers, Facebook audience, chime in with as many as you'd like. One isn't specific about our invasive species, but it's come up a couple times. What is the fish that is the all-time photo bomber of all time of any of our programs? There's one that just really wants to be on camera. Can you tell us who he is? There he is.
That guy right there, for sure. I love that. He's the photo bomber fish. That is absolutely fantastic. So that is a clown triggerfish. And you're right, I just looked around here because sometimes we have multiple fish of the same species in a tank. And so because I'm only showing a small portion of the tank, you are seeing multiple fish, but you think it's the same one. But we only have one clown triggerfish in here. And yes, he seems to be very happy to be in front of us here. He's just doing laps around us. Here he comes again. There we go. And I think he does stand out with those bright yellow lips that he's got there as well. I love that.
One of my favorite fish in the world. So I'm really glad we got that query. We've got one. You highlighted a few things that we can do, certainly for invasive species in Southern Ontario. Is there anything that you can do for invasive species worldwide? Are there organizations to support? Are there things that you can do when you're traveling? Anything that jumps to mind on that front?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. So traveling is a huge thing because obviously we want to see and appreciate, different cultures, different habitats, environments in the world. So if you are traveling, especially to different continents around the world or incredibly different ecosystems, to be really mindful of the customs and rules that country has in place to protect their own species. Nobody knows how to protect their own species better than the countries who house them. So make sure if you're going somewhere and you're trying to walk in a national or provincial park, and there is a rule about washing your shoes or maybe wearing booty covers, or you can't go with shoes you've worn somewhere else. I know that you think, oh, it's just one person. It won't make a difference, but it really could. And if we all have that mentality, then we're definitely going to make a massive negative impact. So we want to think that, yes, as one singular person, we can make a difference. So by following travel rules and customs and not transporting goods across borders like that, so agriculture, you have to be really careful with it, and then also not cross-contaminating different habitats that we might travel to and between.
Fantastic. We, with our Parks Canada program on this exact issue, their sort of handy song was clean, drain, dry your boat gently down the stream. So just an easy way if you happen to be having a small watercraft to make sure that it's clean, drained, and dried, because go a long way to preventing any invasive species from being transferred. So I'm really glad we got that query. And as we head over to our jellyfish, one of our questions is about our lionfish specifically. Our audience has heard that in some places they eat them now as a means of preventing them from spreading. Can you speak to that anyway? Do you know?
Definitely. So there's lots of different ways that places have tried to eradicate invasive species. I'm not sure of exactly where in the world that would maybe be a method for it. But if it's something that, legislative has proved, there's culls that happen for sure for invasive or overpopulated areas of species where they're just taking over. So sometimes governments will in place rules to allow the public and the people to try and assist in eradicating a species like that. So I don't know, Justin, if you're able to check for us really quickly, maybe somewhere in the world that does happen.
Yeah.
But I have no doubt that there would be maybe a rule in place for that to be a thing as well.
So this is actually, it's funny because it's the one species that's really become popular in the public eye around eating it. So I know they're venomous, and we talked about that earlier, but when you clean them, take off the spines, they're eatable just like any other fish. And everything from like celebrity chefs to like NOAA in the United States, the big government organization, talk about eating them as a means of preventing them from impacting reefs. So they've become a bit of a global issue as a venomous fish, and we talked a little bit about that. So anywhere in the world that they're invasive, they are on the menu. So if you see lionfish, you're doing a bit of a public good by eating them, which is very neat. Let's see what else. Oh, Mark wants to know, is there a most dangerous invasive species in Southern Ontario? Any that really jumps to mind?
Most dangerous species in Southern Ontario. Okay, let me think on this for a quick second. I'd say the most dangerous one, maybe not the most dangerous, but the most common and the ones that have maybe been around for the longer amount of time, and so they're doing damage over a long term, is things like dog strangling vine and zebra mussels. They have been around even when I was a child. I remember people preaching about them and talking about them. And oftentimes with environmental or conservation issues, if you are saying that we're in trouble and things need to happen and we need to act on this now, over and over and over again, sometimes we can unfortunately lose the public interest behind it. And I get it, after a while you might get less inclined or more frustrated with being told over and over again that something is wrong or dangerous or bad for us and that you should be doing something in your life to help stop it. It can be draining after a while, but it's so true. It is an active mission that we need to be working on to protect these native species that we have here. And so I think that maybe not the most dangerous, but now are the most embedded in our society, that there pretty much may not be a hope of ever eradicating them.
Yep.
We can manage them from now on. So it's all about species management and how we can try and let them have the least impact in our native species.
We had a question very related to that answer, which is can invasive species ever be good? This is a big question. No pressure.
Yes.
But share away.
So yes, invasive species I mentioned earlier that they can be brought in kind of accidentally, like on the bottom of a boat or in a shipping container with food coming from another country and importing it in for humans to eat. So they can come truly accidentally like that. But one of the ways that they can be brought in on purpose is sometimes if there's already an invasive species here, occasionally it's been known that we will bring in maybe what we think is a less dangerous invasive species to come in and poach out the first one. So if there is maybe a beetle or a bug or anything like that exists, or some sort of insect, we might bring in a species of frogs or toads that eat it, because the frogs or toads are less of an issue in that habitat than the bugs or insects would be. So there is a way that they can be used maybe counterly for it to help us, but then again, you still end up with an invasive species here that you have to manage and work and protect that native habitat.
Yep. I was going to say, I'm in Newfoundland, and here we're a province that's really linked to moose, and moose aren't native here. They were intentionally introduced, and now we have the most moose of anywhere in the world. And so it's become sort of inextricably tied with local culture. There's huge hunting culture around moose. So it's not necessarily a good thing. It's presented a big challenge in the national parks here, but it's also really linked to the whole society now. So it's an interesting question. By and large, try not to introduce invasive species, and the way that humans move around the world has really caused that to sort of turbocharge over the last few decades. But it's a really neat way of thinking about the world. So I'm really glad we got that question. Thanks, guys. Mary Ellen, time flies and you're having fun. So if there's anything major that you want to share with us before we wrap up, or a last message about invasive species and what we can do about them that you'd like to leave us with, we'll wrap up after that.
Definitely. So here, let me turn my camera back around here for us so I can get us back here. And then we can also have the jellyfish behind us as well. But the way that we always like to end our programs, I know, is talking about that we can make a difference. One person, we can change. So by learning about them this way, coming to accredited facilities, maybe going to museums, learning about these invasive species and the little ways that we can help in our everyday life, about our choices in our gardens, to even the bigger traveling ways that we can assist, we make a difference as individuals. Here at the zoo, we are participating as well in Reverse the Red Day. So interacting with social media posts, gaining knowledge and revenue from those promotions and different organizations that are helping to support these species out there. We work not only to protect the species here, be a seed bank for them, an insurance policy for nature, that is our goal here at the Toronto Zoo, but we're also trying to spread awareness for these species and these native habitats to keep them safe and able to support the animals that are and the plant species that are supposed to live there. So just by joining us here today, if you come out on Monday as well, we'll be learning all about biodiversity in the wild as well, and just some amazing, fantastic programs that Jesse and Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants offers. So tune in and learn all you can.
Well, thank you so much. No better message than that. And for anyone who does want to register for Monday's program, you can check out the Zoo Facebook and YouTube page, or you can head to our website at exploringbytheseat.com to sign up. And again, this program, everything else we do is on YouTube. So if you want a bevy of dozens of broadcasts to learn all about the world of conservation and the amazing work the zoo is doing to help foster that, do check that out. Lots to explore and discover. Mary Ellen, thank you so much for joining us today. Passion, expertise is always through the roof, and so nice to get to explore one of the coolest places at the zoo, featuring some of the most amazing animals and really overzealous triggerfish of all time. So yes. We'll end there. We'll say farewell. Stick around for when we're done, but we'll end off our broadcast and wish you all a wonderful rest of the day. Bye for now, everyone. We'll see you all soon. Thank you so much.